Welcome to Tell the Whole Damn World and our new weekly standalone Cal History episode. It's Friday, May 16th, 2025, and if you haven't heard about us before, let me give you a quick introduction. We're the podcast for Golden Bear fans who love the University of California. If you're like us and are unabashedly and unapologetically all about Cal, you've found the right place. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Reza Serafinejad, and in today's episode, it's just me and Leslie Mitchell talking all about John Galen Howard, the man principally responsible for designing the UC Berkeley campus and several of its most well-known buildings at the turn of the last century. But before we get to that, I want to once again thank Jeff Ferrato with On SI, which is part of the Sports Illustrated family. Jeff was kind enough to write an awesome article about us that was just released earlier this week. You'll be able to find a link to it on the front page of our website. Between Jeff and Jake Curtis, they do an amazing job covering the world of Cal sports. Thanks so much, Jeff. We appreciate you. And just a reminder, this podcast is entirely a labor of love and a reflection of how much we love our university. Would you be kind enough to take a minute to help tell the whole damn world about us? Like and subscribe. Share us on your social media. Encourage all your Cal friends to go to our website, tellthewholedamnworld.com. Speaking on behalf of all of us here, including Ahmad and Leslie, we sincerely appreciate all of you out there. Okay, give me just a moment and I'll be right back with Leslie to talk about John Galen Howard.
This week in Cal history.
Leslie Mitchell, class of 1981, is a third-generation Cal alum and lifelong Golden Bear fan who writes articles about notable people associated with our university. You can visit her website, calbearshistory.com, or follow her on Twitter under calbearshistory, where she posts stories of interesting students, faculty, and alums. Leslie is an incredible resource when it comes to learning more about prominent people associated with our university who have done great things in this world. We couldn't be luckier to have her as part of the show. Today, Leslie is going to tell us all about John Galen Howard, the man who is principally responsible for designing many of the most jaw-droppingly beautiful buildings on our amazing campus. We're doing this interview on his birthday, May 8th. Welcome again to the show, Leslie.
Well, thank you, Reza, and thank you as always for your very kind words. Happy birthday to John Galen Howard. Without him, I don't know what the Berkeley campus would look like. Very different, I'm sure.
Right. Well, one of the things, I'm going to jump a little bit ahead on this, but I can't quite help myself. And I got to let everybody know, first off, that Leslie does this incredible job of prepping me to give me a lot of background information about these people that we're talking about. And so just the other night, she wrote up a 7.5-page Cliff Notes for me to read through, and just incredibly thorough and full of such good information. And I really appreciate that, Leslie. But one of the things that stood out to me was, and I'm sure Leslie's going to get to this as we talk, but the location of Doe Library. There was a plan to place that on the Oxford Street side of campus, kind of as a grand opening to campus. And it was thanks to John Galen Howard that he said, no, that needs to be in the center of campus as a prominent place and for ease of access for students and all of that. And I'm just so thankful for that. I mean, if you can imagine, as the backdrop for College Game Day when it came, and just how incredibly beautiful that is. So anyway, that's just one of the many things we'll talk about, but that was just one of the incredible buildings that he designed on campus.
Yeah, actually, he wanted it there for ease of access, because obviously if you're in the north part of or the far east part of campus and you have to go all the way down to Oxford Street, that's not convenient for the library. And people had to physically go to the library in those days.
Right.
There was nothing digital. And he also thought it was a metaphor for the purpose of the university, that the heart of the university was the library. So he wanted it in the center of everything.
Right.
He was a Massachusetts boy, grew up, born and raised in Massachusetts, went to MIT undergrad, and then he went off to New York City and got a job as an architect. And this was in the 1880s. And he only worked in New York for a couple of years, and there was a big building boom going on out in Los Angeles at that time. And he decided that's where he could really make it big. So he took off and went out to Los Angeles. Unfortunately for him, the year he got there, the boom kind of fizzled and things didn't go very well. He was not a fan of Los Angeles.
Yeah, I was reading your notes. He had some pretty bad things to say about.
I think he said, the longer I stay here, the more utterly despicable this place seems. Sorry to all of our Los Angeles listeners. And then he paid a visit to San Francisco, which he then called a wretched conglomeration of shanties without dignity or beauty.
Yeah,
which might have been true because it was before the earthquake, and I don't know what it looked like in 1889. But
it's true. It's true. It could have looked very different, especially in the decades after the gold rush and everything just kind of built on top of one another. Who knows? But
he was a guy who said what he thought. He did not pull his punches.
Right. Yeah. Right. East
so
Coast
when things didn't work out so well with the building boom out here, he went back east, and then he decided that what he really needed to go do was study at the Des Écoles de Beaux-Arts in Paris, which is where Julia Morgan, who we talked about earlier, also studied, although she came a few years after John Galen Howard. And he studied there for 3 years, came back to the U.S., set up his own practice in New York City, and got a lot of good commissions and seemed to be doing well. Meanwhile, back out on the West Coast, the University of California, which had started with 24 students in 1869, had grown to over 2,000 students. And they needed more buildings desperately.
Right. This is right around the turn of the century, right? The late 1890s.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. And they had the good fortune to have a donor. You probably know who that is.
Phoebe Hearst.
Phoebe Hearst, our grand old lady that gave us so much. Yes, and she was very big. As anyone who knows anything about the Hearsts knows that she traveled in Europe all the time and was very big on the classical stuff and collecting art and all that, which she passed to her son. And so she decided that this was going to be her sponsorship, and she offered to pay for all the costs of a big competition, an international competition, to design the campus for the university, and also to pay for the construction of some of the buildings herself.
Right.
So yeah. It was literally an international competition. They had competitors mostly from Europe and also from the East Coast of the United States.
Yeah, that must have been pretty costly. And I think notably, too, were there 11 finalists who...
Yeah, they picked 11 finalists, mm-hmm. and they offered them an all-expense-paid trip to Berkeley, which is helpful when you're designing a campus to know like what it looks like.
Right, and they were all from either the East Coast or from Europe, right?
Europe, right. Mm-hmm. And one of the finalists chosen was John Galen Howard, who had submitted a plan.
Right. So obviously he must have won it. I mean, that's obvious then, right?
I mean that's the story, right? He wins the competition. Young man wins the competition, comes out to Berkeley, does the camp. No, he finished fourth.
Fourth? I know, right? Fourth. That's...
Yeah, that was unexpected, really, when I first read that. The winner was a Frenchman named Émile Bernard, and he came to Berkeley to collect the prize, which was $10,000, which was a lot of money in 1899.
Right.
And he was the idea was he was going to be in charge of implementing his master design plan. Unfortunately, it didn't work out because I don't know whether it was cultural differences or just his temperament or the language barrier since he didn't speak English or what exactly it was, but he made everybody really mad. Everyone felt insulted. He apparently was very volatile and yelled a lot and stomped his feet and didn't like being told that his plan needed changes. The problem, though, is partly or largely the fault of the prospectus for the competition.
Right. It
'Cause they
didn't mention the hills
they
in
didn't
Berkeley,
mention
right?
hills. So his plan obviously wasn't going to work as is because he didn't realize how hilly the campus was. So everything was going to have to be graded, and the buildings couldn't be positioned exactly the way his plan was. And also he did not take advantage of the all expense paid trip to Berkeley that the other finalists had before they revised their plans. So he didn't, he had no understanding of sort of that. What John Galen Howard immediately said is it's got to be focused on the Golden Gate Bridge, the way it's laid out, and they didn't have the bridge, the Golden Gate, I should have said, and the Bay, because they don't call it the Bay Area for nothing. The Bay is the center point.
That's right.
And that's right. How the campus should be focused instead of just, Bernard had it focused on the
city streets like Shattuck Avenue or whatever,
right. That was the axis of the campus. And so, that needed to be changed. You needed to take into account the hills, just as you do when the campus tucks right into the hills and it spreads out toward the bay. And seems totally normal to us because that's where how it's always been.
Well, I just think it must have been a sight to have seen with that Frenchman who just got so upset and irate, and the regents and Phoebe Hearst, and I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall to have just witnessed what had happened on that day, because that just sounds like...
Well, it wasn't just one day. Apparently there were multiple meetings and they all went poorly.
Wow.
They had by the way, the chairman of the French department there to translate. So who knows? Maybe he was getting it wrong. I don't know.
Who knows?
But ultimately, the breaking point came when Mr. Bernard said, "Well, no, I can't stay in Berkeley. I will oversee this from Paris." And the regents said, "No, that's not going to work." Remember, this is before this is not the digital age. No. This isn't even the transatlantic telephone age. The only way you could communicate was by telegram quickly. Or by letter. But, you can't send plans or drawings or photos by telegraph. So it was just kind of crazy.
That's crazy.
I don't think he really wanted to do it, basically.
Yeah. I wonder, did he get the $10,000?
He got his $10,000 prize because he won the competition.
Yeah. Well.
He wasn't committed to do the project. So they were like, okay, well, what are we going to do? Our guy isn't going to do it. And they looked at the number 4 place guy who they decided it might be better to have an American because he might be more, number 1, he would speak English, be helpful. Number 2, he might be more conversant with the ways people interact and so forth.
And willing to actually be on site, probably, as well.
And he was willing to be on site. I don't know what happened to 2 and 3, the 2nd and 3rd place finishers, but they got skipped over. And John Galen Howard was given the job. But the job was not to put in his plan. The job, John Galen Howard's plan, which had been dismissed as being, in the words of the committee, somewhat monotonous, because it was basically a bunch of rectangular buildings that all were in a row. I saw it, and it was like, yeah, that's not very exciting. The idea was he was going to implement Mr. Bernard's plan.
Uh-huh.
So, but he was going to be the supervising architect. He was going to be in charge of because the plan was just like, okay, we're going to have these buildings that are generally going to look like this, and they're generally going to be located these places. But he was going to do all the detail work on it, which turned out to be basically they trashed Bernard's plan. It was unworkable. Again, there was the whole problem with the hills and the grading, which would have cost a fortune for the grading. And also the original prospectus said, forget about all the existing buildings, North Hall, South Hall, the library, Bacon Hall, all those. You don't have to take them into consideration in your design. So I guess the idea was we're going to rip those all down and start from scratch. Well, that never happened. Actually all of them except South Hall are gone, but it took decades for those buildings to go away.
So John Galen Howard kind of maybe very loosely kind of paid lip service, I think, as you said in
there was
your
a lot
notes
of talk about, we're following his plan, but ultimately it was completely dismissed. And they didn't use John Galen Howard's plan either. Essentially, they came up with the concept of sort of the central core of the campus like we have it now, where the Doe Library is and Wheeler Hall and that whole area as being the center of the campus. And it was focused toward the bay, down Oxford, toward Oxford Street. I think that eventually changed. I don't know about you, but I would today say the focus of the campus is toward Sather Gate, which wasn't part of the original plan. I think that's how I've always thought of the main entrance to the campus. Officially, the main entrance to the campus is Oxford Street. But I think most people think it's Telegraph Avenue and Sproul Plaza and Sather Gate.
Right. And it used to be before, the university annexed basically that whole area south of Sather Gate, right? That used to be
that Sproul Plaza area. Yeah,
mm-hmm, exactly.
That was Telegraph Avenue used to go all the way up to where Sather Gate is.
Right. But no, I would think it was incredible. I think you noted in your notes that John Galen Howard was responsible for having designed and built 41 different structures on campus, 17 of which still remain standing. And
I think it's actually more, because I was reminded that by the journalism department today in response to one of my tweets that Northgate Hall is also added to the list I gave you. So yes, at least 18.
Wow. Okay. And
Northgate Hall was originally designed as the temporary architecture building. So that because he founded the architecture department at Cal while he was doing all this other stuff, and it remained the temporary architecture building until Worcester Hall was built in 1964. So it was over 60 years.
And what's up with Worcester Hall? I'm sorry, right? Everybody knocks it.
It's the worst.
Right.
I'm not the first to say that. I actually worked there for 3 years when I was a student at the Environmental Design Library. So
okay.
I'm very familiar with Worcester Hall, yes.
But it was funny, like in one of the things that I think you'd mentioned or that was in this book was that one of the structures that has since been torn down was a poultry building for chickens.
Yeah, the poultry husbandry building. Yeah, so a lot of these structures that are torn down weren't meant to last for the ages.
Sure, right. You don't have like these big Greek columns or anything.
Right. Well, the poultry husbandry building, I think it departed to Davis when the university farm was started in Davis.
I see.
And all of the poultry got shipped to the valley.
That's funny.
John Galen Howard's first building at Cal was the Greek Theater. Which is a pretty good way to start.
That's a great way to start. And it was supervised, the construction of it was supervised by our friend Julia Morgan.
We hired, yes, right, for her first job as an architect after she came back from Paris.
Right. But I didn't realize that, I guess it opened in 1903 and officially opened with a play, The Birds, I guess by Aristophanes.
Got to have a Greek play to open the Greek Theater. Yes.
Right. But prior to that, the president, right, Teddy Roosevelt gave a speech there, I guess.
The commencement address in May of 1903. Right. It wasn't finished yet. The back part of it, the seats were all there, and the stage was there, but there wasn't, the whole background of the stage.
I see.
Where people come in.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. I mean, that's pretty cool to have the president come out to do the commencement address and to, kind of kick that off. And it's still such a great venue. And I understand it was built over an area that they used to do a lot of large gatherings anyway.
Right. There was a student who had the name, the perfect name for Berkeley, of Benjamin Weed, who discovered that this area had really great acoustics in the 1890s. And the university ended up using that area where the Greek Theater is now for a lot of events, just because it had incredibly good acoustics. And it was called Ben Weed's Amphitheater. And,
well, they're certainly right.
As I like to say, he's not the last Weed to have been on that spot.
Well, they're certainly right about the acoustics, because even just from our place here in Berkeley, if we open up the windows on a hot summer night, you can hear whoever's performing there at the Greek Theater pretty clearly. It's kind of amazing. Just rings
But
out
it's
over the whole
interesting
community.
that the Greek was not actually part of the original plan. There was not a theater component to the original plan, but it was just decided President Benjamin I. Wheeler, he really wanted a big space for big ceremonies and events like commencements and such. So that's how we got the Greek theater. Then the first building that was part of the plan was California Hall, which is not probably the most memorable building on campus. It's a lovely building, but it's not like one of those. I think because it's an administration building in part too. Most of us don't go in there that much.
Sure.
But that sort of set the style. If you look at California Hall, as I was saying to you earlier, if you look at California Hall and you say, okay, that's a John Galen Howard building, and then you look at the whole rest of the campus, you can say, okay, Wheeler Hall, okay, Doe Library, okay, Haviland Hall, Wellman Hall, all of these buildings, you go, yeah, okay, I see the style.
Right.
It's basically a simplified classical style.
Right. Yeah. Amongst some of these incredible buildings that were built on campus. So, in addition to the Greek theater, we have the Hearst mining building, which, of course, is just incredible. And if I understand things correctly, back at that era in the early 1900s, the mining department on campus was the largest department on campus.
And the largest mining school in the United States.
In the United States. Wow. So, but yeah, that building, I know many people probably don't have too much occasion to go into that building, but it's just, breathtaking. And then, of course, Doe Library, which is just incredibly magnificent.
Yeah, the mining building, if you haven't been in there, I mean, it's a lovely building from the outside with those magnificent arched windows and the great doors and all of that. When you go inside, it's just like, whoa, look at this. It's got these 50-foot high ceilings with these glazed glass domes, and it's a brilliant space.
It really
and it was
is.
very innovative at the time because it's almost a sort of a pseudo-industrialist style inside. And the building in the exterior combines sort of classical elements with traditional Spanish California architecture. And it was, and it still is considered quite an innovative and memorable building.
And the tile work and everything. And then, just when you walk up the steps and then you open this grand, just incredibly ornate door, and it's huge, and you're able to open it with such ease, and it's like, wow, it's just like you're entering a palace almost. It's amazing.
That was Phoebe Hearst's baby. She had that built as a memorial to her late husband, George Hearst, who was a mining engineer, which is where he made his fortune.
Right. And so that's where the whole Hearst family fortune really comes from. It's from the mining prior to newspapers and all of that. So, but anyway, digress a little bit, but Doe Library, Senior Hall, which is near and dear to my heart as a fellow of the Order of the Golden Bear, which is, just made of logs, which is kind of amazing, I guess, back in 1906.
And the Women's Faculty Club, which is wood shingle.
Right.
Stevens Hall, which was originally the first student union, which is sort of in a Tudor revival style. What's interesting is if you look at the difference in the buildings, the ones that are academic in nature are all in the classical style, and the ones that are non-academic are not. So Senior Men's Hall is log, Women's Faculty Club is shingle, Stevens Hall is Tudor revival. They're not that classical Greek style. So he made that deliberate, conscious decision to separate the styles.
Other notable structures on campus, Wheeler Hall, of course, I think I mentioned that. And then, of course, the Campanile itself, which is just incredible, and Sather Gate. And I thought this little story was interesting, and a lot of you may have heard about this, but when they designed Sather Gate, there were 8 nudes that were on the gate itself. And of course, right underneath it, underneath one of the male figures, it said erected by Jane K. Sather. And she did not appreciate that. And
she was horrified and demanded that these nude reliefs be removed, which they were.
and many, many, many years later, they decided to put the nudes back up, but there were actually 4 women and 4 men. And so they put them back up, but they put the erected by Jane K. Sather on the female side.
They put they put the women on that side. Actually, they were discovered. I was an undergraduate when this happened. They found, I don't know how they had been lost, but nobody knew where they were. And they found them in at Edwards Field, like in a storage area.
Really?
They found a couple of them, and then the rest of them they found at some marble company in Oakland.
Wow!
And once they were rediscovered, there was this big debate, and it was decided, yeah, let's put them back. That's what John Galen Howard designed. So they did, and that was in 1979.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, I also thought there was an interesting story about Doe Library in particular. And we'll
talk about the plans for Doe Library.
Yes.
And John Galen Howard, his office was in Berkeley, but in 1905 he decided, I want to move my office to San Francisco, which was not the best year to move your office to San Francisco, because in 1906 they had the earthquake and fire in which his office was destroyed in the fire. Fortunately, one of his draftsman, the only one that lived in San Francisco, a guy named Henry Boaz, ran down to the office. He had to push through the police lines because they were stopping people from getting through. And he ran up 6 flights of stairs to their office and grabbed everything he could get that he could save. And what he was able to save included the plans to Doe Library.
Wow. I mean, that guy, if ever there's someone who deserves a shout out, it's that guy, right?
Go Henry. Exactly.
Incredible.
So, I don't know about you, but to me, Doe Library, although the Campanile is spectacular, the Doe Library, particularly the reading room at Doe Library, is like the masterpiece.
It's the masterpiece. I was just going to say that. Absolutely. And I mean, to think about in 1906, it would be one thing if the building were maybe, 2 stories, something like that. 6 stories, and running a burning building and that guy is a hero for sure. My goodness.
Yeah, well, he's lucky they didn't dynamite it while he was in there. Anyway, yes, so the plans were saved. But there's a funny story about the plans, too.
Well, yeah, there's a big debate. I mean, not a big debate that went on between President Wheeler and John Galen Howard, and the Greeks versus the Romans, right?
Right. President Wheeler was a huge fan of Greek civilization. He was a classic scholar, but primarily a Greek guy. He kind of poo-pooed the Romans, I guess. And John Galen Howard was an artist. He didn't care if it was Greek tradition or Roman tradition or whatever. And he wanted the exterior of the facade had a lot of Greek influences there, huge Greek influences, but he wanted to have arches, and so that he could have giant windows in the reading room that we all know and love. And the Greeks didn't have arches. So President Wheeler was really unhappy. He said, no arches. And they had this ongoing debate for a long time. And finally, Howard said, look, you've got to have a lot of light. It's a reading room in a library. You need massive amounts of natural light, particularly in those ages before, electric light was common.
Yeah, gas lamps or something like that. I mean, my goodness.
And even today, it's so wonderful to go in there. I used to study in there all the time when I could. So he went out, and we got the reading room as it is now, with the giant windows and the Roman arches.
Yeah. No, thank goodness. And I understand even with the Campanile itself, he had other plans, or he included in his plans were a reflecting pool and other things that just certainly would have even added to the majesty of it.
On the landscaping. He was always having arguments about landscaping. He felt the landscaping was his job, under his control, and other people said, no, we need a landscape architect to do the landscaping.
Right.
And that, you know how it is in any large organization. There was always a lot of tension on various who's in control of what and who gets credit for what.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, it sounds like a lot of disagreements and issues to John Galen Howard. Well, he had a lot of side projects and other things that he did. So that just designing the campus itself wasn't the only thing he did. He did all these other projects as well on the side. And I think that kind of rankled
Yeah, there
some
was
people
you
back
know how
then too.
people are like, well, I'm an artist. I'm entitled to do the work I want to do. No, you work for us.
Right.
Yes, we want you to focus on us. It was kind of inevitable,
Classic. Right.
but kind of culminated, I think, with Memorial Stadium
Right.
because there was this big issue of where to locate it. Once they had no problem raising the money, which is hard to imagine, but they got a subscription to cover the cost in like nothing flat in donations. But then it was like, well, where are we going to put it? And the old stadium, which by the way, John Galen Howard also had designed, it was called California Field, and that's where Hearst Gymnasium is now. But there was a contingent that wanted it up in its current location, but John Galen Howard wanted it down on Oxford Street, down where Edwards Field is now.
Right. It may have had something to do with the fact that he would have received 6% of the
Yeah,
cost
he
if
had
it
some
were.
sort of a deal in his contract that if it was built west of
That's-
Piedmont Avenue, he got 6% of the cost as like a bonus or something. And if it was built east of Piedmont Avenue, anything, it's not just the stadium, but any building east of Piedmont Avenue, he didn't get a bonus. So
Right.
that might have affected his opinion. But he also said, hey, it's an animal area, and you know you're going to interfere with nature if you build it up in Strawberry Canyon. And also access, it's flatter down there on Oxford Street, easier to get to for us old people.
We still have those access issues today. It doesn't disappear.
He wanted to build a two-tier double-decker stadium that would hold that was sort of Roman Colosseum style, and it would have held about 60,000 people instead
That
of
would have been right around where Edwards Track is, right? Is that the
right.
idea? Yeah.
But after a lot of acrimony, he lost, and it was built where it is, and he did design it, so credit to him. And we were talking about this the other day when they were going to renovate Memorial Stadium. Right before they started the renovation work, they tore a lot of it down, but they tore out all these. There had been all these offices and things that
right
inside the stadium that had been built just because they needed the space, and so there was just sort of this tiny dark damp corridor that you had to go through to get to your seats on the west side of the stadium. And they tore all those offices out in that last season. And it was beautiful in there. I was so surprised, and had spectacular views like it is now. And that's how it was designed to be originally.
Right. Well, I mean, I know that a strong case could be made that, for the sake of access and attendance, it probably would make a lot of logical sense to put it where Edwards is and all of that. But quite honestly, it's so incredibly breathtaking to have it where it is, nestled there in Strawberry Canyon. And I wouldn't put it anywhere else in the world. It's just so perfect where it is.
I mean, if you got an earthquake fault, you got to build right on top of it.
That's right.
The other thing is, I guess John Galen Howard was prescient because he knew BART was going to be located down there right by Oxford Street, and that would have been really easy access.
Yeah,
but
right.
The Regents, they didn't know. They didn't get the memo.
Right. Well, hey, if I understand things correctly, he was the head of the architecture department on campus and also taught architecture and did that for a number of years into the mid to late 1920s. And then I guess he was on a trip in the Middle East. And
yeah, he took a sabbatical year. And I guess, what happened was he took a year off actually to serve in the Red Cross in Europe during World War I in France. And then he came back, and shortly thereafter, President Wheeler retired, and Mrs. Hearst died in the influenza pandemic. So everything kind of changed, and new people came in, and it didn't work out so well.
Yeah.
So he went on a sabbatical to the Middle East, and while he was there, he got a telegram saying that they had decided to terminate his contract.
Well, I think in some ways it was a relief for him because, he kind of had to butt heads time and time again, it seems, to try to get, his way on a lot of those different projects. But it was nice to see that he continued to head the architecture department, and then he continued to teach classes.
Yeah, he stayed on as the head of the architecture department even after that. And he did actually, he said to his friends, and there's letters where he says, I was actually relieved because I was just tired of it. He'd been doing it for more than 20 years. That's a pretty amazing run of
Absolutely.
work.
I mean, it's just incredible to me to think, when you look at the campus and all those magnificent buildings. And I've always kind of taken it for granted after I was born in Berkeley. So I've been around the campus my whole life, but it wasn't until other friends who were from out of state who were my classmates at Cal, and they're just like, oh my God, this is just so incredible on campus and how everything was laid out and designed in the buildings. And I think it's very true that he did an incredible job designing the buildings and structures on campus, and just so glad that that he did get his way on so many different things on campus, and that Doe Library isn't sitting there on Oxford Street. That would have been a real waste, I think.
Well, I guess we should be grateful that Émile Bérard was kind of irritating.
A hothead. A real hothead. That was good. Thank goodness. But thank you so much, Leslie. And last but not least, he passed away, I guess, just a couple years after stepping away from the university. Was it 1931 at the age of 67?
He retired from teaching at the architecture department in 29, and then he passed away in 31.
Gotcha. But yeah, I mean, what a magnificent person, and just so grateful to you for shining some light on him. And we appreciate you so much, Leslie. Thank you for today.
Well, thank you, Reza. And as always, go Bears.
Go Bears. It's always so much fun spending time with Leslie. As I said in our previous episode, who knew learning about history could be so much fun? Before we wrap things up, it would help us greatly if you can take a quick moment to like and subscribe. That will really help us reach other like-minded Cal fans. And please help tell the whole damn world about us by sharing us with all your Cal friends. Simply share us on your socials and tell them to go to tellthewholedamnworld.com or follow us on X, better known as Twitter, at Win4Cal. That's Win, the number 4, Cal. Thank you for tuning in. We sincerely appreciate all of you out there listening and watching. Tune in next week when we'll have the incomparable Mike Silver on the show as our featured guest. Mike has forged a reputation as one of the most talented sports writers in the world. But perhaps more impressively, he may be one of the biggest Cal fans to have ever lived. You'll love hearing the stories he has to share. See you next week. This podcast is about celebrating all things Cal and the prominent people who are passionate about the University of California. Do you feel Cal is the center of the universe? Do you bleed blue and gold? We want you to tell the whole damn world about it. Go Bears!